Okay, I'm going to watch the clock. I'm going to finish chapter 2, and if I have time, I'll vlog with this. So this is part 2 of chapter 2 in my bedheadness. After agreeing on a time and place, Stacy hung up the telephone. Hearing her rustling around in the kitchen, Heidi came sauntering around the corner. "Well, Your Majesty, I see you have finally decided to come for breakfast," she said, leaning over to lay an affectionate hand on her dog's head. The dog responded with a nuzzle and turned to its waiting dinner. Stacy poured herself a cup of coffee and carried it to the living room. She picked up the manuscript that laid on the table and sat down on the couch. Looking out the window, she noticed that it had started to snow again, adding more fluff to the already white ground. Putting on her reading glasses, she placed the papers on her lap and began to focus on the task at hand. Lost in her work, and relishing every word of the story she was editing, she stopped occasionally to stretch and refill her mug. Rather than take a lunch break, she grabbed an apple and a banana from the kitchen and took her lunch back to the editing table. As the lengthening shadows of the late afternoon crept across the room, Stacy turned on the light beside her and continued her editing. At last she pushed her glasses aside and rubbed her tired eyes. She dropped the manuscript on the couch and got up and stretched, smiling with satisfaction at the amount of work she had accomplished. Stacy possessed a strong work ethic and was not one to miss a deadline or let her employer down. Her boss was well aware of her dedication, and that was a key factor in his decision to allow Stacy to work from home in Winter Falls. She needed fresh air and exercise, so she pulled on her boots and coat and headed out the door for a walk. At the end of her driveway, she stopped and scanned the horizon. The entire neighborhood was quiet. Everyone was still at work, on their way home, or hibernating inside, away from the cold. She loved the winter, so it was so refreshing. She inhaled the crisp, cool air and started on her way down the street. She just wanted to see if Justin was home, that was all. At least, that was what she was telling herself. As she rounded the corner and sauntered closer to the house, she saw that his car was not in the driveway. With a sigh, she looked around the front yard and let her thoughts drift back to the time when circumstances were different. It was during high school years that she and Justin had dated. Stacy was a cheerleader, and Justin would wait for her after the weekly practice and walk her home. Unfortunately, their dating came to a sudden end when Justin developed a crush on one of the other cheerleaders. Stacy remembered it well, because it was the week before her 16th birthday when Justin suggested maybe they should cool down for a while, mumbling something about being too young to go steady. She was not one to cry or lament, and gracefully agreed not wanting to create a scene. She had too much pride to let on she was hurt, so she buried her grief deep inside. Being popular with the boys and girls helped immensely, and she didn't spend much time in a blue funk over Justin. He was a great guy and fun to be with, but she never thought of herself as being in love. After their breakup, Stacy and Justin gradually resumed their friendship, pranks and all. And as best friends do, they spent hours on the phone confiding their hopes and dreams and helping one another through every teenage crisis. With a smile, Stacy moved up the walk to see if Justin had cleared the snow from his doorway. Just as she neared the porch, she heard the crunch of tires in the snow as the car approached from the road. She ran and hid by the side of the house as a burgundy sedan pulled in the driveway. She watched Justin climb from his car, reach into the passenger's seat for his briefcase, close the car door, and hurried up the front walk. Stacy waited until he was about 2 feet away and then jumped from her hiding place. "Boo!" she yelled. "What the hell are you doing?" he bellowed, loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. "What are you doing?" he shouted again, trying to catch his breath. She laughed at the expression on his face. His face had gone white from the fright, and the veins on his forehead were pulsing. "Hi," she said, jumping up into his arms. Justin dropped his briefcase, braced himself, and caught her in midair. "Stacy, for the love of God, what are you up to now?" he said, still slightly out of breath. He pulled her down and pried her arms from around his neck. Stacy let him go. The poor man looked as if he'd seen a ghost. "I was out for a walk, checking out the old neighborhood. Actually, I wandered this way just to be nosy and see how you made out with all the snow from the storm last night," she said, giving him a playful look. Then she added, "How odd. You sure seem to have an awful lot of snow piled around your door." She tried to suppress the grin that threatened to explode into laughter. "I think maybe a neighbor gave the snow a helping hand," he said wryly. Well, Stacy, it's good to see you, but I can't stay and talk. I'm in a hurry, he said, leaning over to pick up his briefcase. Then he brushed her aside and moved towards the front door. Don't be rude, Justin. I was just out for a walk and happened to be over this way and decided to stop and see if you were home. I'm still a little upset over the stunt you pulled last night, he said, making his way towards the front door once again. How can you be mad about that? I thought it was quite creative, she said, smiling sweetly. Justin looked into her laughing hazel eyes and for a brief moment felt a stirring within his chest. A startled expression came over his face as he realized how attractive she was, wearing no makeup, her cheeks and the tip of her nose red from the cold. Now he had to push these thoughts from his mind. He was with Cheryl now, and that was that. He turned away from her. The history between Stacy and Justin went way back. When he and Stacy had first met as kids, they played together in the neighborhood, but when they entered grade school, everything changed. He discovered that girls weren't as much fun to chum with anymore. Even though he and Stacy kept up the friendship, they were drawn apart by diverging interests. Then in high school, his hormones started bouncing off the walls, and hanging with girls was cool. It was during those first few years of high school that Stacy and Justin began to trade practical jokes. Nothing serious, just silly, good-hearted pranks. They had a lot of fun together. One thing led to another, and they dated for a brief while. He knew he hurt Stacy when he broke it off, and he was just a kid at the time. He had apologized to her, and she had taken it like a real sport. After high school, everyone went their separate ways. Some went to college, some went directly to work, and others moved to the city. Thankfully, he and Stacy remained friends. For that, he was grateful. Listen, Stacy, I don't mean to be rude, but I have to hurry and get back to the office for a meeting before dinner. How about we visit some time this weekend and catch up then? Stacy looked hurt and then turned. That's fine. I have to go anyway. She started down the driveway. I'll see you later. And with a wave of her hand, she was gone. By the time Stacy made it home, she had to hurry and get ready to meet Lizzie. She had a quick shower, pulled on a pair of jeans and a red turtleneck, adding gold hoop earrings and gold bangles. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she brushed her shoulder-length brown hair and became lost in thought, thinking about Justin. A smile spread across her face. Justin was seductively attractive, the kind of man who inspired thoughts of strength, reliability, and gentle touches. She liked his athletic build, short, straight, brown hair, and best of all, those vibrant brown eyes that made his whole face light up when he smiled. She impatiently dismissed these thoughts and moved to the bathroom mirror to apply her makeup. A little mascara, a light dusting of blush, pale frosted lipstick with a dab of opium as the finishing touch. Stacy chose a long beige cashmere coat from the closet and remembered to drop some food into the bowl for Heidi before heading to the garage. Climbing into her car, she flipped on the radio and turned the volume up as she backed down her driveway. She was in a party mood. By the time she reached the restaurant, Lizzie was already seated and waiting, looking wonderful as usual, in a body-hugging black sweater that accentuated her figure. Her straight, light brown hair was swept into an evening style that perfectly suited her pretty face. Hi there, have you been waiting long? She asked, seating herself across from her friend. No, I just arrived 5 minutes ago. Lizzie reached for her drink and took a cool, refreshing sip. Stacy unfolded her napkin and laid it on her lap, waving to a few people before turning her attention back to her friend. So what do you feel like tonight? Lizzie inquired, looking around the half-empty room. A man. I feel sexy as hell, she said, laughing at her own honest admission. Very funny, smarty pants. Now what are you going to order? Lizzie asked, picking up her menu and glancing at the selection. We have a big choice today, she said. Chicken or steak? Pick one. That's a tough decision. Let me think about it for a minute. Why don't I order a drink and we'll talk a bit, and then we can decide. Stacy waved the waiter over and ordered tea and resumed her conversation. How's work going? She asked. Not bad, Lizzie answered. How's the editing? I'm actually quite excited about the new manuscript I'm working on. This young writer shows great promise, she said. Then she abruptly changed the subject. Guess who I saw today? She asked, with a gleam in her eye. Lizzie paused for a moment while the waiter set a drink down in front of Stacy. Stacy, every time you lead with a question like that, I'm afraid to ask, but I'll take a stab at the dark. Just then, Lizzie raised her eyes and looked over her friend's shoulder, saw a familiar couple enter the restaurant. Justin, she exclaimed. How did you know? She asked with a hook of surprise. She lowered her voice. I mean, Justin just came in with Cheryl, she whispered, motioning in the direction of the door. Stacy glanced over her shoulder then turned to Lizzie with this mischievous smile and a gleam in her eye that meant trouble. Lizzie wondered what was going on in her friend's pretty head, but knew better than to ask. She picked up a drink and downed it, calling to the waiter for a refill. Stacy waved her hand to catch their attention. "Oh no," Justin mumbled to himself, trying to look everywhere but at Stacy. "What's wrong?" Cheryl asked. But before he could answer, she looked around the restaurant and found the problem sitting 20 feet away. With a disgusted look, she turned to Justin. "We'll just go and say hello and then sit at our own table. We'll just go and say hello and sit at our own table." Cheryl didn't say a word as she followed him towards Stacy. That is the end of chapter 2. And I don't think I have time to vlog, but I'll vlog later. So tomorrow we'll be on to chapter 3. Bye.